Rent for many New Yorkers are going up. Tenants are not happy. Several elected officials are on their side, and landlords, they want more than they're getting. Also, in this program, you'll meet a young academic achiever from Edward R. Murrah High School, and you'll also meet a young author who has published 2 books about Haiti and has won a distinguished award from a very well-known university. You still have time to call a friend or family member and tell them to tune in to Brooklyn 45 TV. Rent increases on 1-year and 2-year leases. Hector Robertson is president of the Washington Avenue Botanic Block Association on the frontier of Crown Heights South that has nothing but buildings along the strip. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you, Mr. Tate, for having me.
Does the size of this rent increase surprise you?
No, it doesn't. It's a political year, it's an election year. We had a couple of years of rent freeze. And so inevitably, what was going to happen this year is that there was going to be some kind of rent increase. Fortunately for many of the renters in New York City, it's been a slight increase to the rent increase for this year. The Rent Stabilization Association, if they had it their way, they would have had a 4% increase for 1 year or a 6% increase for 2 years. Fortunately, the Rent Guideline Boards voted 7-2 to actually have a modest increase this year of 1.25% for 1 year and 2% for 2 years.
How does that work for people who are not tenants and who don't quite understand the 1 year, the size of the 1 year, and the size of the 2 year?
If you have to be a renter to actually understand how this really affects you as a renter. If you're not a renter, you really don't understand it. So there is a lot of different ways in which this affects the actual renters throughout New York City, especially in the areas of Crown Heights, where there is a cluster of people who have multiple jobs in order to actually make that rent at the end of the month or at the beginning of the month, whichever way they do it.
And you did say especially Crown Heights, so it's almost all over Brooklyn?
It is almost all over Brooklyn, where you find people that are work for the city of New York, for example, that have 2 and 3 jobs that cannot make the rent or ends meet within their own family's environment. So this is particularly difficult in Crown Heights. I look at Crown Heights because I run that organization along Washington Avenue. And so the tenants that come to our meeting express their frustration on how to really deal with the day-to-day of their lives, with the rent increases, the increase in the cost of living. Raising their families in Brooklyn becomes a burden. And so with the new influx of people in Crown Heights, especially in the area of Crown Heights South, you have people that are coming in that don't understand what this really means for a person who lives in Crown Heights for 30 or 40 years.
Who are these new people? You're talking about the whites who are coming.
We're talking about all of the gentrification that's happening in the area. So these are transient people that come into the neighborhood. They're there for a year or 2 and then they're gone. But the people that stay here feel the brunt. The way they feel the brunt is that when they come in and they take an apartment, usually what the building owner does, he cosmetically fixes this apartment, rent it for above market rate, and then when they cannot afford it anymore, they leave. The problem with that is that that rent stays as a stigma, as a staple of that unit. And many people that then come after these people don't really have the know-how to go to DHCR, the Department of Housing and Community Renewal, and get a rent history on that unit. And so that rent stays high for anyone that comes after whoever's renting that unit.
What's the benefit of knowing the rent history?
Well, it's important because building owners have a tendency of cosmetically fixing apartments. They don't really invest the money, if you will, to actually make the apartment up to standards or market standards. And so when you walk into a building and you know that there is a vacancy and you're told that the unit is $2,000 a month, well, as a new tenant, You're supposed to go down to DHCR, get a rent history. Don't tell the building owner that you're doing this. Just go down there, get a rent history, see what was the last rent paid for that unit, and then you can come back to the owner and say, I want the last rent, the last legal rent on this unit.
Do they have to give you that rent?
They do. By law, they do, because that's the last legal rent on that unit.
You mentioned earlier that the rent increase does not surprise you because this is a political year. Explain that.
Well, it's election year for a lot of city council members especially. And so the mayor is actually also running for re-election. And so the real estate board is a very powerful board in this city. A lot of people who want to curry favors with the mayor really have to play ball in terms of the political atmosphere in this city. And 2 years of freeze rent is good for the people of the city of New York, but I believe that the mayor had to make a decision as to whether or not he will allow the rent board to actually do an increase, but not as the lobbyists expected him to do, which was a 4 or 6 year lease for 2 years.
And these are the lobbyists on behalf of the owners?
Building owners, yes.
So who are the lobbyists on behalf of the tenants?
We don't have one. There's no lobbyists on behalf of the tenant. The history of New York in terms of how this rent guideline board operates really is geared towards the building owners. Tenants have very little remedy when it comes to advocacy within the city of New York, within the rent guideline boards. So a lot of the people in the city of New York have to hope and pray that politicians, the rent guideline board, and even the real estate industry, which, by the way, they don't really care too much about increases in cost of living, any other expenses that tenants have to go through. It's not something that they have in mind when they actually want their money. And so what happens then is that you have to be able to have organizations, coalitions to go after the politicians, to try to put a case together from a tenant's perspective so that they can actually sway in the way of the tenant, whether slightly or completely like the mayor did for a 2 year rent freeze.
Okay. Now you said that there are no lobbyists on behalf of the tenants, but you do have tenant associations. So what's the power of the tenant association?
Well, we try to put the pressure on the politicians to actually really be advocates to the tenant. This is how we got the mayor to actually really freeze the rent. Because for years, the lobbyists were actually getting these astronomical increases from the rent guideline board. And so those 2 years were a lot of pressure that many city I don't want to say anti-development or anti-building owners, but people that were feeling the hurt went to the mayor and said, we need some relief. And that's how those 2 years came about.
So you had a rent freeze for 2 years?
2 years.
What happened before that rent freeze?
Well, we were paying those increases. The city was paying those increases. The mayor had, I think, if I remember correctly, 2 appointees to the rent guideline board since it's been appointed. But before that, when the Bloomberg administration was in office, this city saw astronomical rent increases from, I think the highest we've seen is about 6% the last time Mayor Bloomberg was in office. And so I think the mayor made a commitment to try to eliminate the notion that this city is going to see that kind of rent increases in the future or as long as he's mayor.
Talk to me about this preferential rent and this arbitrary removal of preferential rent.
Preferential rent is something that a lot of the landlords are using on certain tenants. If you're a tenant, you rather have the preferential rent. The landlord will not hesitate to get into a lease agreement with you. But preferential rent really doesn't give you a lot of remedies. The landlord can actually terminate you at any given time. They may give you a favorable rent, but that doesn't really go a long way if you cannot do certain things in your apartment.
There was a court case, I understand, last year. And tell me a bit about the court case. And apparently that said that the board should take into account the burden that's put on renters was significant about that court case?
Well, what was significant was that they withheld the mayor's decision to freeze the rent. So they upheld that decision based on those very 2 points. They wanted to take into account the cost of living in New York City and the fact that many families just could not afford anything above 1 or 2%, which is what we got this time around.
Specifically, what is important that you want people to know?
What I wanted people to know is that this rent guideline board is probably not doing a whole lot of justice to the people of New York, because I believe that there are just too many tools that the building owners have against renters. Major capital improvement, MCI, is one of them. I think that every single building in the city of New York is affected by MCI, which means that if the building owner decides to change all of the windows in the building, they pass on that cost to every single tenant in that building for the duration of your lease. So that means that even after you pay up that bill, you continue to pay as long as you occupy that unit. So that is a strike against every single tenant in the city of New York. And if you look around you, you see all these buildings. There is no need for MCI anymore in this city, because these building owners are making more money than ever before. Okay, and the contrast to that is that renters are spending more of their salaries into rent, more than ever before. So that MCI, as far as I'm concerned, and many others around the city, is completely obsolete. And the second thing I want them to know is that the deregulation of these units is coming fast and furious, because once the threshold for any apartment unit in New York City reaches $2,700, that building owner has the right to deregulate that unit, to deregulate as many as they can. So what we're looking at is that the stock of apartments in New York City is shrinking with every passing year that this board, they need to slow down the rate of these increases, because the more they push and the more they push, those thresholds will reach the 2,700 mark, and that's going to be a problem in the city.
Tough for you, tough work for you, tough for the tenants.
Very tough.
I suppose some people will say the marginal size of the rent increase is tough for the landlords as well.
Well, the landlords, like I said before, are making more money than ever. Yeah. So I believe that 1.25% for 1 year and 2% for 2 years is really not a big sacrifice for them. I think that they have grown to just have these astronomical increases that now they're just not very happy with this.
Hector Robertson, you should have corrected me.
That's okay.
And you are the president of the Washington Avenue Botanic Block Association.
Yes, this organization has been in effect for the last nearly 20 years. I run it with my wife, and we try to bring information to the community, because there's a lot of people in the community, especially senior citizens, that don't have the time to run around and get that information that they need to be able to stay in the units. So we bring that information to them. We bring politicians to actually answer the questions that they need answered, where to get the services, how to get the services. And there is one group that we work very closely with that I need to mention tonight.
Yeah, but do it quickly, because we've only got 15 seconds.
In 15 seconds. The Brooklyn Housing is a organization in Brooklyn for the last 38 years, helping tenants get information on how to file documents with DHCR, how to file documents with the courts. They are very good. They're very essential to every single tenant that lives in New York. You can go to brooklynhousing.org.
Thank you, Hector Robertson.
Thank you.
Next, Pat Jacobs will be chatting with a young academic achiever from Edward R. Murrow High School. And after that, I'll be chatting with Cindy Similien-Johnson about 2 books she has recently published. Pat, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. With me is Nedelka Yearwood, a student at Edward R. Murrow High School. Nedelka, welcome.
Thank you.
It is such a pleasure to have you in studio today. Now, your vocal major, your average for your freshman year was a whopping 97.5 First semester 97, second semester 98. How do you do it?
It's mostly about priorities. When you know you have something to do, you have to know that you have to put the time in and the hard work. And when you do put in the hard work, eventually the results do come out how you want them to be.
So how do you get all that time to put in the work?
Well, us teenagers, we have social media and we have our friends and we have all of those outside activities, and you can't be on social media if you know you have like a project to do the next day.
Stick a pin right there. You stay off social media sometimes to study?
When you have to, you have to. It is hard because it's such a major part of our lives, but you have to.
But so you're a fairly disciplined student.
Yeah.
So you're a vocal major, but you have an interesting suite of courses. Chemistry, geometry, Italian. Why?
Well, I wanted to challenge myself with chemistry and Italian. I took Spanish in middle school, so I wanted to take Italian as a new language to discover.
Do you plan to use it?
If one day I went to Italy, then yeah, I would plan to use it.
All right, so let's talk music. You're a vocal major. Why this specialty?
Well, music has always been a big aspect in my life, and singing has always been a passion too, and I love doing it.
So what do you plan to do with it, let's say college and after college?
Being a music teacher would be fun.
Say that again. That's music to my ears. You want to be?
A music teacher.
Wow, that's great.
Or a recording artist. That would be good too.
All right. So, do you think the other subjects will come in anywhere? Let's say chemistry, teach music?
Even though science isn't like my favorite subject, chemistry is really interesting. I didn't think it would be in the beginning of the school year, but I wouldn't mind going to the field of chemistry.
All right. So that's the vocal part of it. Do you play any instrument?
Yes, I've been playing guitar for several years, and I've just started playing piano.
And I think I in your bio you said something about swimming. How does that fit into all this potpourri?
I swam for 10 years at Hebrew Educational Society, and it was a competitive swimming team. Yeah.
You swam for 10 years?
Yep.
That means you started swimming at what age?
4.
So have you stopped, or you still want to swim some more at the competitive level?
No, I've stopped. I focused more on music and what I'd like to do in music.
All right. So you want to be a recording artist, you want to teach music. How important is music to an individual and perhaps to the society in general?
Music is very important to an individual and society because not only do you express your emotions in a beautiful and enjoyable way, but also you can learn about the world and all its cultures and its people just by listening to one song. And in addition, music is really relaxing and it can be a great source of comfort, as it has been to me.
All right. In half a minute, what would you say to young people about the need to engage in various activities? How useful is that?
Well, according to the old saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and you only have your childhood once, so you should always make the most of it, and people should always try new skills and new hobbies, because one day in the future they might use it. And of course, colleges and careers of all sorts look at what you've done outside of your academics, so that's always important.
Well said. Couldn't say it any better. Nedelka, it has been a pleasure. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Pat. My next guest, Cindy Similien-Johnson, has recently published 2 books about Haiti. Haiti Is and Let's Speak Haitian Food. Actually, Cindy, I've been to your website. You publish a lot of books.
I have,
and
thank you.
You're going to tell me about those books. But let's talk about Haiti Is.
Sure.
Where did the idea come from? And tell us about this book.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here, Professor Tate. I truly appreciate it. The book actually came to mind back in 2015 due to incident reports of the Haitian deportation issue in the DR. a friend of mine who is of Dominican descent actually contacted me asking what can she do, and I suggested that she contact organizations who are doing marches, demonstrations, and she decided that was not enough. She wanted to do more. So we decided to collaborate on a project in which we can portray that Haitians and Dominicans can come together, work together for a good cause. So we decided to write this children's book to portray. And she's the illustrator, I'm the writer. So we decided to publish this book to portray the positive side of Haiti. And as you see throughout the book, we have great images about the country. We talk about the food, the culture. And also our mission was to also instill the cultural pride of Haitians who are not only born in Haiti, but also in the DR. And this is our way of giving back to our community, not only here locally, but also internationally in Haiti and in the Dominican Republic. And I would also like to note that proceeds from the first year of publication, 2017, all proceeds will be donated to two organizations in Haiti and DR. One of them is Ancien pour Haiti, also known as Teach for Haiti, and Hispaniola, who is on the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And that was our way of giving back to our background, our family.
That's right.
Yes.
Haitians and Dominicans.
Yes.
Let's speak Haitian food. What is this book about?
Yes. About 5 years ago, I met my grandmother, my 102-year-old grandmother, for the first time in more than 20 years. 102 years old,
okay.
Yes. And I met her for the first time in more than 20 years. And when I met her back then, 5 years ago, I was just amazed about my culture, my Haitian background, and I wanted to learn more, but I also had vivid memories of eating Haitian food in her backyard in Haiti. And I knew that the key to my Haitian background is through the food that I had growing up. A famed civil rights activist, also known as the Reverend Dr. Herbert Dartrey, said that every generation needs a cultural revolution. And for me, I took those words to heart, and I decided I need to look back, as the Sankofa proverb states, to look back in order to move ahead. And from that experience, I realized that I'm not the only one who has fond memories of eating Haitian cuisine. So I contacted more than 100 members from the Haitian diaspora, and they were willing to share their stories, their memories of cuisine, of community and culture. And I realized that we had a lot in common, not only that we are in the diaspora, spread throughout the world, but also our common thread was the food. So that's why I decided to call it Let's Speak Haitian Food, even though yes, we do eat it, but there's something about the Haitian food that when we talk about our culture, we are also empowered by it.
And your Haitian food is also very unique. I mean, there are lots of people who are not Haitian who say that they must every now and again go eat some Haitian food.
Yeah.
Do you cook?
I do cook. I make the best division, also known as black mushroom rice. We are known for our black mushroom rice. And also in the book, I've included some recipes for those who are not familiar with the Haitian food to get to know and cook Haitian food in their own kitchen.
So if I read this book, I'll be able to cook Haitian food in my kitchen?
Yes, indeed.
Guaranteed?
Guaranteed, 100%.
Okay. You have a very interesting story about how you began to think about writing books. What is that background? People would love to know.
Yeah, definitely. When I was very young, I always had an interest in writing. I would have the black and white composition notebooks, and for me, I wanted to write the history of my family. I was always in search of my family and who they are and where they came from. And again, through this culture journey, I found so much about my culture, my background, where I came from, and I found out my grandfather was actually a mayor in Haiti. This was very recent, and for me, I always had an interest in writing. I always had an interest in telling stories, and I find that my family's from a town in Jeremy, also known as the City of Poets. So the love of writing, the love of telling stories actually runs through my blood. And a few years ago, I was trying to figure out what was my purpose and why do I exist, why I'm alive. And it came, I'm of the Christian faith, and I truly believe that your purpose defines the type of life that you have. And for me, I discovered that my purpose is writing, is to tell stories, and also to be that storyteller, talk about not only my faith, but also about my Haitian heritage. And I'm truly, truly grateful for the opportunity to do that every day. It's not something that I clock in and clock out, but something that I do every single day and try to get some words on papers, knowing that it will inspire, encourage, and empower individuals who come across those words.
You said you're a Christian.
I am.
And you mentioned Reverend Daughtry's name earlier. Is he your mentor?
Actually, I work for one of his non-sectarian organizations, and I've come across his daily teachings. He's a man that has empowered, marginalized communities here in Brooklyn. I'm truly inspired by his work, by his legacy. And I actually mentioned him in the book that I've written with regards to Let's Speak Haitian Food, and I put down the quote that says, every generation needs a cultural revolution. And he is like a father figure, like a grandfather figure in my life, and I'm truly appreciative for the work that he has done, not only in the community, but also nationally, internationally, in Sudan, in Darfur, and also here in Brooklyn, and for local communities in Brooklyn.
You have a website, and on your website you have several books that you've written. What is your website?
My website is www.csjmediapublishing.com.
And this is your company.
Yes.
And how many books have you written?
So far, my goodness, you put me on the spot. I've published because, again, once you know what your purpose is, it comes naturally to you. And I published about 15 books so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we can see those 15 books on your website.
Yes, indeed.
I want to thank you for
Thank you.
being my guest.
Thank you.
I'm going to read the book, Let's Speak Haitian Food. I'm going to try this. All right,
Okay.
I'll try it. I'll head to my kitchen and try it.
Good.
Thank you, Cindy Similien-Johnson. I encourage our viewers to read your books. This interview, as well as the discussion about rent increases, can also be seen on our Brooklyn 45 TV YouTube page. That's where you can also watch Pat Jacobs' interview with Nedelka Yearwood from Edward R. Murrah High School. We'd love to hear from you. Post your comments on our Facebook page, Brooklyn 45 TV, or email us at info@brooklyn45.com. And by the way, we have openings for 2 interns to work with our social media. Email us at info@brooklyn45.com or go to our Facebook page and message us, or we'll contact you. On behalf of our entire Brooklyn 45 team, I'm Sam Tate.